Welcome to the Everything New York Giants podcast with New York Giants fangirl. I'm your host, Adrianna, and today I have a very special guest. I'm so excited to have on Dave Syvertsen, Evaluation at Ourlads Scouting Services. Dave, so excited to have you. We have a lot to discuss knowing that the Giants now officially have the third pick in the draft.
We do have a lot to discuss. This is probably the busiest time of the entire cycle. It's like immediately postseason, leading up to all of the pre-draft process, because everything right now is just dream and fantasy. Like, who are they going to draft? Who are they going to sign? Who's going to coach? Who the other team's going to coach? So it's a fun time of year, though. This is kind of why you grind all summer, all fall, that you can really come on and have some good football conversation, even though none of us know what it's going to do. But tip of the cap to you, by the way, getting my last name right. Very few people actually get that one correct. So good job. Very good.
Oh, really? Thank you. I am someone who no one can ever pronounce my first name, my maiden name, my married name, nothing. So I'm used to it too.
Awesome.
All right, so let's go ahead and start with your thoughts. I saw your tweet. The Giants are obviously keeping the GM and the head coach, and you said that's exactly what you expected. Do you like it, though?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, because I am big on, especially with front office personnel, that they deserve more than 3 years, unless it completely bottoms out. And the argument can be made that it bottomed out, but I think without us knowing what truly happens beyond closed doors, like who really was behind that Daniel Jones decision, because Joe Schoen originally said no to Daniel Jones when he came in. He declined the 5th-year option, which is essentially saying you're out after your 5th year in this franchise. And they go on that weird run in 2022, win the playoff game, shock the world. Daboll wins Coach of the Year. Giants are back on the way up, and then it crashes. And then you have to ask yourself, did Daniel Jones truly deserve that contract? Was that more Mara or was that more Shane? Shane kind of put his stake in the ground by saying he's not going to re-sign Jones to a 5th-year option. And it's not like Jones took the league by storm that year when they made it to the playoffs and won a game. So I think that this has more to do with front office personnel, especially in that role, with early success and the situation he took over, which I think some do forget about. It was as bad as it gets. Salary cap, draft picks, everything, that I do think he deserves another shot at going. And I do think this year's draft class did help him maintain his job. The head coach, I'm kind of 50-50 on.
Yeah. I think if you wanted to make the argument either way, you could say that, my opinion is that Daboll is not a great coach. I do think that he is stuck with the roster that Shane built him, though. So I think, maybe we're not seeing the best version of Daboll because of the players that are on this team. So with that being said, let's talk about, what's going to happen this offseason, what our ideal picks are, and things like that. I want to talk about your mock draft, the first one that you sent in your email newsletter.
Yeah.
So I signed up for your emails. If you guys haven't, it's Ourlads newsletter. I think you said you guys are doing 3 days a week.
Yep. I have the Mondays, mock draft Mondays, which is very draft centered only. Wednesdays is pro day Wednesdays, which is a lot of like pro personnel, coaching, free agency, all that stuff. And Friday's kind of like a mix of the two. So you'll get if you sign up for that newsletter, ourlads.com, the window pops up right away. You will get 3 newsletters per week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning.
Okay, awesome. So I got the first one. And for those of you who haven't signed up yet, you might not see this, but he did the first 5 picks and he has the 3rd pick as Cam Ward to the Giants, which I think a lot of Giants fans would be happy about. Now, the question that I have about this, was this before or after we found out about Deshaun Watson?
Well, that's a good question, because it's kind of stinks. We'll probably talk about this at some point. The Giants don't necessarily control if there will be a quarterback available when they pick. Last year, when they were picking, that you knew that one of those quarterbacks would be available. Not the top 3, but J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix. You knew one of those guys could be available. This year, in my opinion, it's going to be a 2-quarterback draft in the first round, if that. I'm not even fully cemented on the fact that Sanders and Ward should be first-round picks. But because they're picking 3rd, and because there's 2 teams in front of them that could go quarterback, that's just going to make this draft process, pre-draft process, even more interesting, because you can talk about the players, whether or not they meet the grade, but are they even going to be available? And if those teams want a quarterback, you're not going to be able to trade up for Ward or Sanders. So in my opinion, to answer your question, the Browns, I'm not sold on them going quarterback regardless of Deshaun Watson. I think everyone is viewing 2026 as the year to go get a quarterback. And I know the Browns fans and that whole organization, since letting Baker Mayfield walk and signing Deshaun Watson, it's been a dumpster fire. But I would tell them that they're probably going to have to wait another year. And that would tell me, don't rush into a quarterback pick this year. Take a Travis Hunter, take an Abdul Carter and Mason Graham, one of those guys, and then go after that quarterback next year. So the Deshaun Watson news probably will not dictate anything within the actual first official mock draft from Ourlads, which comes out in a couple of weeks.
Okay. And you had the first pick as being Sanders going to the Titans.
Yep.
So I am curious what they do with Will Levis. And, you know, you said it, and this has been talked about a lot, that next year is really the quarterback class. And we know that someone like Joe Schoen might not have a next year. So he's likely going for a quarterback regardless. Maybe he's not going to try and trade up for one. But if you're the Titans, my thought process is now they have a new GM. They're going to have a new GM after they just announced they're firing him. New head coach, everything. You've got the first overall pick. You've got a million options. So wouldn't it be a great idea to bring in a veteran quarterback? They're going to have the opportunity at a bridge. They trade out of that one spot. Maybe they trade with the Raiders or someone else to go to, 5, 6, whatever, still get Abdul Carter, Will Compton, someone like that. And then they have a bridge, maybe try to help out Will Levis. I mean, to me, it sounds crazy that they're already willing to give up on him.
Will Levis is as physically talented as any quarterback in the NFL. When you're just talking about the ability to throw the football, the ability to run, the size and the toughness, he had a lot of good tape at Kentucky, but the story I had coming out on him coming out of Kentucky 2 years ago was just the lack of consistency, and you don't know if he has it between the ears. And that can be really hard to measure in evaluation. That's why you have to trust guys to truly watch the tape, but also understand what they're watching when it comes to situational football, the opponent they're up against, the players that they're actually playing with. There's so much that goes into quarterback evaluation. And Will Levis has shown in college and now in the NFL that he probably cannot handle a true number one job at a high level. Do I think he could start in the NFL? Absolutely. I think he's one of the 32 best quarterbacks the league has right now. But in terms of getting your team to a really high level of football in the jam-packed AFC, I'm not sure he's the guy I would want to put my chips in the middle of the table with. And I believe that's partially why Ron Carthon got fired by Tennessee this morning as GM.
Okay. So with the Giants going in the first mock draft, with them going Cam Ward, there's a lot of Giants fans who love him. And I can guarantee that most of them have not watched all the tape on him, but they've watched Miami games this year, especially, etc. What are his strengths and what concerns do you have that are going to translate at the NFL level for him?
Great question. My favorite part of Cam Ward is similar to how I felt about Jaden Daniels. They're not in the same tier prospect-wise. We had Jaden Daniels as QB1 last year, but Cam Ward will not approach that grade. But what I liked about him, this is a guy that was a 0-star recruit out of high school. Not that that matters, but just to give some context. All right. Goes to Incarnate Word. I'm pretty sure nobody knows any player that's ever played at Incarnate Word, including myself. Levels up to Washington State and excels. He crushes it there. Levels up again to Miami and leads the country in touchdown passes. I mean, when you part of what makes quarterbacks succeed in the NFL and fail is, do they respond? How do they respond to adversity? How do they respond to a higher level of football? Because that is inevitable. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, you are taking an enormous leap in level of competition the second you step on that NFL football field. Have you proven already that you can do that macro and come in and improve your level of play and improve the players around you? Cam Ward has done that not once, but twice. I also believe in a guy that plays with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. And this is where I'm actually working on a piece right now, comparing Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, completely different backgrounds, completely different training from the teens through high school to college and now onto the NFL. Cam Ward, to me, has the kind of moxie that I think a team can respond to, but you don't want to overstate that. I've been caught there before. I've made mistakes there before of kind of overplaying that a little bit. But I love Cam Ward on a personality level, that he has ascended to a higher level of football despite also ascending his level of competition.
Hmm. Is that piece, will it be in the newsletters?
The link to it will be in the
Giants fans are gonna
newsletters.
love
Yeah.
that.
There's
Okay.
going to be an article on our website. We're still new to this. Ourlads is a very old school, traditional 40-year-old program. We're still trying to get up to date with modern technology and all the areas to put our content, but it will be a YouTube video on the Ourlads YouTube channel. It'll be an article at ourlads.com, and I will feature it in the newsletter itself. I'm hoping to be done by the middle of next week, because I know that's the most common question I get is the Cam Ward versus Shedeur Sanders. And they are as similar as they are in terms of playing backyard football, lack of mechanics, lack of consistency. There are a lot of differences between them. And I think the question is going to come down to who is closer to their ceiling right now and who has more to chew off. And to me, the obvious answer there is Cam Ward.
Okay. I'm excited for that. I'll put all of the links in the show notes too, so people can sign up and everything.
Cool.
Yeah. If you were Joe Schoen, and hypothetically speaking, let's say things worked out with Daniel Jones and he was going to be here for another 2 years, what are you doing at 3?
If you were confident with that quarterback, that's what you're saying, right?
Yes. With whatever quarterback was on the roster. Let's say it was Drew Lock for another year. Who knows? Okay.
I would say it would be hard to pass on a Travis Hunter. The question I would have, and I've put this out there already about him, this was in the newsletter, with that there needs to be complete cohesion from owner to GM to coach to even teammates. What is your plan with him? And we've seen players, a recent memory of Percy Harvin, who came out of Florida and got drafted in the first round to the Vikings a long time ago. Nobody knew what he was going to be in the NFL. He was a wide receiver. He was a running back. He was a returner. Everybody just knew that he was more talented than everybody else. But Minnesota never had a complete plan for him. They kept changing him. They kept moving him around. And when he started getting hurt, and then you start to wonder, did you really miss out on coming up with a good macro level plan for the player? And Travis Hunter, if you truly feel he can play both ways at the next level, he is undoubtedly the number one pick guy I would want at that number 3 spot. But if you're going to tell me, if you're the owner and you tell me he can only play one side of the ball, I'm not sure Travis Hunter is worth the 3rd pick as a corner or as a wide receiver.
So
that's going to be a really interesting situation to follow. But if you put a gun to my head right now, I think I'm going to go pass rush, because I want the Giants to get that identity back on their roster. And Kavon Thibodeaux, solid, not great. Brian Burns, a little overpaid now, but a good player. If you can get an Abdul Carter, the edge rusher from Penn State, who reminds me of Micah Parsons in more ways than I want to admit, because he wears the same jersey number and plays for the same program that Carter did in college. And sometimes you don't want what we call helmet scout, meaning, hey, you're just reminding yourself of what you watched 4 years ago. But there are so many similarities there. And Mason Graham would be a hard guy to pass up on too. But the edge rushers, if you can get a real one, a real top of the line, they can change a defense. And I think that's where I would go, Abdul Carter.
Especially if they keep Shane Bowen, something that's going to be a necessity. With that being said, I briefly want to touch on Kayvon. 2 questions. Would you pick up his 5th-year option? And based on what you saw from his college tape, is this what you expected from him? Do you think that he was worth the 5th overall pick?
It's tough. He's a tough call. So first thing I will say that I had a mid-first round grade on Kavon Thibodeaux, and usually my grading system was, the way I labeled him was he'd be a solid starter at the next level. Never a Pro Bowler, not an All-Pro, just a guy that's you can tolerate as a starting defensive end / edge linebacker. In college, I think the most impressive tape I saw on him was his true freshman season. He did get a little nicked up, but I never saw him ascend. And this is what I mean in relation to Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward. Kavon Thibodeaux gets everyone excited as a true freshman at Oregon years ago, but then you never really saw him take the jump up. So it's got, some of these guys do show up to college and they've already hit their peak. They're at their ceiling, where a lot of guys, you can project them to improve at the next level. Isaiah Simmons is a very similar situation Giants fans are familiar with. This is a guy that he was a freak at Clemson. And we said, hey, if he gets even better, he's going to take over the NFL. But what is hard to determine when you scout college players, he was already at his peak. He was at his ceiling. Maybe he was a little misused in Arizona, but after watching him here, there just isn't much he can do to help out a football team on a week-to-week basis. So Kayvon to me is a no on that 5th-year option. Okay. And there are a couple of potential benefits to it. One of them, you open up the door for a new young edge rusher like an Abdul Carter. Number 2, and I say this to Evan Neal as well, you will never find a hungrier version of Kavon Thibodeaux and Evan Neal in their 5th-year option, which is next season with it decline, because they know they're going to get paid the next offseason if they play well. So you will get the best, highest version effort version of Kavon Thibodeaux if you decline that option. Will he be pissed off? Maybe, but these guys, they chase paydays. And I think that's one thing we knew about Kayvon coming out of college. He was chasing brand and marketing and image just as much as he's pursuing a Super Bowl, which is, that to each their own when it comes to your own career.
Yeah, definitely. Someone else I want to talk about is Deontay Banks. The biggest disappointment, I think, on this team this year.
Yeah.
What did you see coming out of college from him? I know one of the biggest complaints that a lot of us Giants fans have is that he never turns his head around and makes a play on the ball. Is that consistent with just who he's always been? And last year he got lucky. He was in the right system. Beginner's luck. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up my Deontay Banks. So I did have a late first, early second grade on him. And basically the premise of my report is exactly what I think about him right now. He is one of the freakiest athletes in all of football. And I mean that. When you're talking about his size and how fast he is and how good his workouts turned out, he is a true freak. So you can understand wanting to take a risk on a player like this at a position that is really tough to project. Me personally, I'll be honest with you, I have a really hard time scouting and projecting college corners to the NFL. It's always been one of these spots where I swing and miss a lot on these guys. And you look around the league, a lot of guys that don't pan out in the NFL are corners. And when it comes to first round picks, Washington, Emmanuel Forbes, they took him in the first round. I think he was the second corner taken in that draft above Christian Gonzalez by the Commanders, and he's already off the roster. And it's a tough position to project. But what hurt me about Banks when the Giants drafted him over a Joey Porter Jr. who ended up going to Pittsburgh was the fact that he just did not play a lot in college. He was a little nicked up. He redshirted his first year. The idea of him, the fantasy of him, is what got him drafted by the Giants that early. And that is a really dangerous spot to be in on a team that you almost can't afford to swing and miss in the first round. And if there's a case to be made against Joe Schoen, it's the fact that his first 3 first-round picks were Kavon Thibodeaux, Evan Neal, and Deonte Banks. You can't always point to one or two things as to why a team fails, but when you are swinging and missing that many times in the first round without a good foundational roster, you're screwed. I mean, at the end of the day, that's where you're going to end up. You're going to end up exactly where they are right now. And I thought that was a huge swing for the fence for an organization that could not afford to swing for the fence at the moment. So Deonte Banks, he allowed, I think, the 5th highest passer rating of every cornerback in the NFL over an X amount of snaps. It was, I think, out of 130 corners, he was 5th worst in the NFL this year. And he's a guy that just never quite developed the skill set to play corner. We know he's a good athlete and we know he can make plays on occasion, but that in combination with the lack of effort that we saw him play with this year, I mean, he might have one foot out the door with this organization.
Yeah. I heard that Adoree Jackson was kind of getting in his ear a little bit and was essentially telling him that he could be a little lazy. So do you think so you don't think the scheme had anything to do with it? That wasn't a big factor?
I think it's a factor. I think that's smart that you bring that up because do you remember who was the happiest guy in the room when Deontay Banks was drafted? It was
Wink.
Yeah, it was defensive coordinator Wink Martindale because he is, when you talk about the prototype physical skill set, tool set of a corner for a Wink Martindale scheme, it is Deonte Banks. He just did not have the skill set. I separate tools and skills in evaluation. Tools are the physical talent and ability that you have. Skills are being able to do everything correctly, on-rep techniques, mechanics, the mind game. And he had half of that. And that's why, every coach thinks they can take a freak athlete and mold him into a superstar. And it didn't work out, and Wink's not even here anymore. So now we've come in with a really zone heavy scheme. And it's like, what do you do with this kind of guy who doesn't have feel? He doesn't have technique.
Yeah. It's very disappointing to watch this year.
It was very.
Okay. Two other, speaking of corner and then also tackle, which is, something for this team.
That's a good way to call it.
Yeah. Who are your top prospects there? I know I've heard the name Will Compton, I think from Michigan, who's one of the top 5 guys, but it sounds like, the Giants are not going to be picking there. And last year we know was such a big offensive line class. This year, it sounds like it's a big defensive tackle class. What are you seeing from an offensive line tackle perspective? We're also probably going to need a guard, a center.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, these are really common questions that we all think of and we all kind of want to put out there. Like, what are they going to do? What are they going to do in the draft? A lot of this will be decided before the draft comes via free agency, right? Last year at this time, I was saying offensive line, don't ignore it. You can't ignore it in the draft and or pass rusher. I remember I got crushed last year by Giants fans on our first mock draft last year. I put before any free agency moves were made. I gave them an edge rusher with their first overall pick last year. And they ended up, obviously you erase that from the equation because they went and traded for and signed Brian Burns to the massive contract. So it did show that the Giants did know they had to get a pure edge rusher in here, but they went the other route. Same thing with the offensive line. They signed Runyon, Illuminor. They signed those guys. So, okay, that kind of decreases the need for offensive line. So this year, I mean, this answer can easily change in the next few months with free agency and who they cut, who they bring back, everything. But I think that first, second, third round, those are the rounds that you really try and go get your starters, right? And every now and then you run into a Tyrone Tracy or Theo Johnson. Those guys started because they had to. They didn't have anyone else on the roster. But I've always viewed rounds 1, 2, 3. Those are the guys you have to draft to be starters on your football team and guys you build around. So now that you know that, it's like, what positions does this team truly need new starting talent at? It's corner. It's definitely, I think they can get away with ignoring offensive tackle for now because Andrew Thomas should be back and Luminor was very solid on the right side. But right guard is a concern to me. And if you're going to bring in a new quarterback and really hope that it pans out, because if it doesn't, these guys are getting canned, you have to have a good offensive line. So I think that the guard, corner, and another, I'm just going to call it a defensive front force that needs to be brought in. It could be an edge. It could be a defensive tackle. And the way football is played now, watch Philadelphia every year. Don't only fill the starting lineup. Get 5, 6, 7 guys in there so that you can keep them fresh. And that's where I think the identity of the Giants needs to turn into is get big, fast, physical dudes in the trenches.
Yeah. And I think, I really wanted to keep Ashawn Robinson last year, and I was disappointed it didn't work out with him. But Nacho, I think, has been fine. I think he might be a free agent this year, but it's because our picks are so good the first 3 rounds. And, it being a good defensive tackle draft, it's at least exciting that hopefully we can bring in someone next to Dexter who can help stop the run.
The size of these defensive tackles in this class, I mean, it's just one after the other. I love not grading players against last year. Like, I get the question a lot, like, hey, where does Tyleik Williams from Ohio State, where would he stack last year? Like, I don't know, to be honest with you. Like, I do use the same grading system, so you could use that as a comparison if you want to. But one thing I will compare is just the sheer strength and depth of this defensive tackle class. Not only is it deeper, it's just bigger. Like, these guys are massive. There's so many guys that are 315, 320 plus pounds that can also rush the passer. You usually get 2 of those in a draft class per year on average. This year, I'm counting 5, 6, maybe even 7. So there will be a value spot for this team to bring in another force next to Dexter Lawrence.
Okay. Good to know. We all know we need some of those.
Absolutely.
Briefly let's talk about free agency for a second. Personally, my top 3 are a swing tackle. Ideally, it's Tyree Phillips, quarterback, obviously, and then corner. I would like to get a corner in the draft, but I feel like ultimately our room is so young. They need veteran leadership over there. What are your top free agent targets? And if you watch the film already for Sunday's game, what did you think about Tyree Phillips?
Yeah, so I posted the Giants game review on Big Blue Interactive, so that's up there for the read. And Tyree Phillips, as confident as I am that he will never be someone that you want starting for you week to week, I am just as confident that I don't mind him as my swing tackle. Okay. I mean, a really good swing tackle is hard to find at the next level, and this derails a lot of football teams in the NFL every year. Good teams too. Offensive line depth is very difficult to find. So I do think that he if I remember correctly, he was injured late last season, and he hadn't played a snap until this game against the Eagles. And for a guy that big coming off a lower body injury, that was a pretty impressive re-debut, if you will, for Phillips. And I would put him in the conversation. The last thing I want to see is Josh Ezeudu ever playing tackle again. So let's keep that guy out of the conversation and keep him at guard, which is where you drafted him and where he started his career. He actually was playing decent at guard before they move him to left tackle and ruin the kid's confidence. He's a potential guy that could be a starting guard for this team next year.
So I had to look at my screen multiple times on Sunday to confirm that it was Ezeudu at left tackle, because I was like, am I really seeing this in week 18? Week 18 of his year, 2 or 3 on this team? We are finally seeing him at guard. Do you have any hope that they will do that for Evan Neal too?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a question that I get into. If there's this conversation that I've been involved with Giant fans the most, it is Evan Neal and what the hell are you doing with him moving forward? I think what we've confirmed is that he's not a starting right tackle. What we've confirmed is that if he's your backup right tackle, okay, you could do worse. Okay. But if you have Tyree Phillips in here and maybe you bring in another body, why not experiment with him at guard? And I think everybody needs to know, not only does his movement traits and his skill set probably suit better for inside play, because his worst issues come in space. When he's in a lot of space and defenders have a lot of area to go, a lot of options, he just can't hang. That's really his problem. He can't stay balanced in space. That's not as big of an issue when you're playing inside. So that erases the biggest issue we've seen with Evan Neal. But part 2, he was a guard his first year at Alabama. He played an entire season at guard. This is not a new position for him. And the Giants have a vacancy at right guard right now. I would love for him and Ezeudu to fight it out in training camp for that spot, bring the most out in each other. And now you have options, hopefully, on your depth chart if someone were to go down.
Yeah. Would you bring back Van Roten because he also has center experience? And what are your thoughts on JMS?
Van Roten, I would say a no to him in terms of right away, right? Van Roten was signed very late in the process. I believe was it during training camp he was signed? It was not during the offseason. I know that. It was leading up to training camp, during training camp, maybe. Yeah.
It was close to when the season started.
Yeah, so and that kind of guy, he's a Ben Bredesen type. He'll be available. That caliber player that can play guard and center. He's not very good, but hey, he can at least prevent the floor from bottoming out underneath you. Yeah, let's wait till then. And before then, let's try to see if we can patch together Evan Neal, Josh Ezeudu, a draft pick, and you can find a lot of quality of starting offensive linemen in rounds 2 and 3 every year in the draft. Go back and look at every draft class. There's always good starters available along the interior offensive line, rounds 2 and 3. So that would be my first route there. JMS is a guy that if you watch all centers around the league, you know there's guys that are worse than him, but there's a lot of guys that are better than him. And that's how I kind of saw him coming out of Minnesota, just because he's very athletically limited. And even though I think John Michael Schmitz would have been a great center in the NFL 20 years ago. And I say that because the athletes that are playing defensive tackle now, it's out of this world how fast and explosive they are. So you almost have to give a little bit of size, a little bit of power so that you can move your feet left and right and adjust. And all these games that these guys play up front with the quickness and speed of defensive tackles, I just don't think he can hang. Is it a priority to let him walk or put him on the bench? No. But another problem, you should pay attention to this in the draft. He didn't play guard in college. He's a center only. And that, to me, it really limits what you can do with him. And it limits what you could do around him with personnel. Like, what happens if you do find a 5th-round center that you happen to really like, but you already have a Greg Van Roten on your roster? Now you're kind of not going to take a player that could be better than what you have because you can't move Schmitz around. You know, he doesn't have any experience at these other positions, and I don't think he's athletic enough to play guard. So my answer on him is he'll probably be the starting center next year, which is not the worst thing in the world. But it'll probably be the last time we see him in the Giants uniform. So you do have to start thinking ahead and planning what you might do in 2026.
Yeah. If they're still around to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
For free agency, who do you think are the best fits for the Giants? Maybe let's just say in those top 2 positions, in quarterback, which we so desperately need, and corner. Unless you would you go corner in the draft instead?
Yeah. Not at the top of the draft.
Okay.
Will Johnson, it scares me a little bit because he's been nicked up the past 2 years. He is uber talented, though. So you can get a few answers on him and his medicals leading up to the draft. So we don't have to say yes or no to him right now. But I don't want to take him that early in the draft. You're either going quarterback or defensive front player in the first round. Round 2, round 3, I haven't really fallen in love with this cornerback group yet in the draft. And I'm still doing a little bit of catch-up work on them. So if you told me, hey, you can go sign one guy at an above average market price in free agency, just one, Dave. All right, I'm taking a corner. And the guy that I love him coming out of college. I love them in Arizona. I love them this year in Minnesota. And I think he fits this scheme if they keep these guys. It is Byron Murphy, a corner from Washington. He's going to be 27 years old. He's going to get paid. You're probably going to have to pay a little bit, but he's smart. He's scheme versatile. He's physical. He makes plays on the ball. He did it in college. He's doing it in the NFL. He's a top-notch, intangible locker room guy, which I think the Giants need a few more of those without compromising talent and ability. But they have to steady the ship. They need someone in there that can hold Tay Banks accountable and maybe get something out of him next year. That's the number one guy I would go after, Byron Murphy, and you'll get to watch him in the playoffs this weekend.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll keep our eyes peeled on him.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go back to quarterbacks for a second.
Yeah.
Stick with free agency. Who do you think is the best fit for the Giants and Daboll?
I got to get this list up here. I mean, it's always funny when you look at the free agent quarterbacks, you're like, holy cow, Andy Dalton's the 5th best one.
The amount of people who've mentioned Carson Wentz, I'm like, please don't. I can't.
He's not even on this list that I'm looking at. I update it. I don't update the free agency that much yet, but my list right now, and I do want to factor in the economics behind it because the Giants aren't going to have a ton of money to spend this offseason. They'll have enough to make a splash move, but after watching Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, and Sam Darnold kind of resurrect their careers under a new environment because the talent of those guys was never questioned. It was between the ears, and you can go look at the situations they were originally placed in. It was terrible, all those situations. Darnold holds the keys to the bus. Is he going to get paid by Minnesota, or will they let J.J. McCarthy take over? I'm not sure Darnold would want to ever step foot back in New York, and I also don't know if he's going to be worth the contract that he will get on the open market. So I want to circle to my next tiered quarterback, who is not as good as Darnold right now, but he has equal upside, and it is Justin Fields, the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback. He was 4-2 as a starter this year prior to Steelers changing over to Russell Wilson. And he's the kind of quarterback that Daboll has had success with. A guy with a rocket arm. He does have the arm talent, but he can make a lot happen with his legs. The best version of Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll, was that first year. And Daniel Jones, he was running his way to a lot of efficient and explosive gains. Am I optimistic this would turn the franchise around? Absolutely not. But you have to make a move. You got to do something. And if the Giants, if you're pressed up against the wall, if you were coaching the Giants and you got pressed up against the wall, you had to win. Are you going to take a shot on a rookie that's never played in the league before? Or do you want to get a veteran in here and you get to skip steps 1 through 4? And that's basically just being introduced to the NFL. You know, Justin Fields can handle the position. At a high level, he has not proven it yet, but he has flashed. So, and I don't think he'll be that expensive. So that, to me, he's 25 years old. There is a lot to Justin Fields that I would like to gamble on, knowing that you're probably still 30-70. It's not going to work out, but I think it presents the highest upside with the lowest cost.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of people talking about Kirk Cousins because it sounds like his contract is going to be what Russ Wilson's was last year. But my concern with Kirk Cousins is exactly what you talked about with Daboll's system is he is immobile. So
he can't move. Yeah.
I don't think there's any, I mean, the best thing that you bring about him in here is he's a veteran who's going to bring experience to whatever the rookie is. If I'm Joe Schoen, there's a 0% chance I'm starting the rookie quarterback week 1 anyway. This team has so many holes. You can't just throw them into the fire.
You'll ruin them.
100%. So, okay, with all of that being said, let's go back to the quarterback class again, because let's just say Cam Ward is gone at number 3.
Yep.
What quarterbacks do you like that are in the second tier for, let's say, the 34th pick? I know you said Jackson Dart is the best against pressure. From what I've seen of Jackson Dart, I do like him. I do like Jalen Milroe, although I know there's a lot of concerns with his interceptions and consistency things. From what I've seen from Will Howard, I don't know if him and Riley Leonard are both coming out, but I know those are probably guys to keep our eyes on during the college playoffs too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those guys will both be in the draft next year. So they're definitely worth watching this weekend. I kind of want to stick with the theme of trying to create with a quarterback. And, again, anyone you take in round 2, round 3, you're going to assume he's not playing this year. And that's where, Giants fans are already on top of me saying, oh, we would definitely would take a quarterback round 2, round 3 if we don't take one round 1. I'm like, well, for what? If these guys are up against the wall and they need a player that's going to help them win in 2025, you're not taking a backup quarterback. Like these guys, I really think Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, every move they make this year will be for 2025, period. They're not going to look into 2026. So with that said, the one quarterback that can help this team in 2025 without being the starter is Jalen Milroe. And he is the only quarterback in this entire class that has an electric, game-changing talent/ability. It is with his legs. But if you play the cards right, Pittsburgh did this a little bit this year with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields as well, that you can have a quarterback, a Cousins, a Fields. I mean, Fields and Milroe would be fun, right? But if you wanted to get a more pure pocket passer in there, you have Milroe that can be a specific weapon for specific situations. You still get him on the field. He can be a big play threat for an offense that needs more big plays. And that's the name I would probably look at. I am a little worried about his lack of ability to truly take over a passing game right now. And even in his long-term future, there's a lot he does that I do not like. The number one thing is he locks onto his target immediately post-snap almost every single time he gets the ball and throws it. He is immediately looking, and the NFL eats that up for breakfast without even thinking about it. So that's something I'd want us to pay attention to. If you want a more pure pocket passer, Jackson Dart is probably going to be the guy. I don't think we should give up on Carson Beck yet. Nobody lost as much talent on his roster from 2023 to 2024 as Carson Beck did. He lost Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. If you took the top 2 threats like that away from some of these other guys, you would see a huge decline as well. So, I mean, example, if you took away Arroyo, the tight end from Miami, and Restrepo, the wide receiver from Miami, those 2 guys were a huge part of Cam Ward's success. He probably would struggle too. So there is some truth to Carson Beck no longer being that first-round pick that we thought he would be over summer. But as a day 2 pick, as an NFL caliber passer that had success in the SEC, that's a guy that I think could make sense if they did want to go the day 2 route. But that's it. There's pretty slim pickings in this draft. And I hate to say it, but at this moment in time, I think the Giants are probably going to end up having to punt on quarterback till next year. Really?
My thing with the backup quarterback is Tommy DeVito is the only other one on this roster. And I think, like we've talked about, they don't have a ton of money in cap space. They're not the Patriots. So do you see them going for a trade for the backup, bringing in an undrafted free agent? Or, I mean, if they get Cam Ward, then it doesn't matter at 3.
Yeah, right. I mean, is there value in bringing back a Drew Lock as your backup just because he knows the surroundings? The coaches know him. He knows the coaches. you want to have the least amount of instability on your roster as possible. Having a backup quarterback. Now, how did the experience with Drew Lock go this year? There were some reports that management was not happy with his work ethic over summer and in the fall. If that's the case, then he's out. So, what other quarterbacks can you go after in a backup type role? I mean, are you going to sign 2 quarterbacks and let them compete? At the end of the day, that is the Pittsburgh model. And I am big on look at the franchises that are always good year after year. Pittsburgh hasn't, I think I was probably 10 years old when Pittsburgh last time they were under 500. They're always in the mix. And what did they do this year? They signed Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And they said, hey, we don't know who's going to be the starter. They didn't know who was going to be the starter in September. They're letting these guys compete. That might be the route you take. So if you sign a Justin Fields, maybe you go out and you either bring back a Drew Lock or, I don't think Zach Wilson would ever want to step foot back in the MetLife Stadium, but maybe you bring in a Marcus Mariota and just say hey, we're not going to win the Super Bowl. They're not going to win the Super Bowl next year, but they do want to be competitive. They want to be better. They want to help develop Malik Neighbors with a real quarterback. Maybe you sign 2 mid-tier quarterbacks and see which one of them rises to the occasion.
I think that's something we all talked about last year, right? Is with Jones coming off the injury, we wanted to know that they were going to compete. And there was all of this speculation that came out. And I don't know if we'll ever know the full truth that the Giants never promised Russ an opportunity to battle it out for Jones. So the question is, with their backs against the wall this year, do they change their strategy a little bit and say, okay, this year, if we can't get Cam Ward, then that's what we're going to do.
That's absolutely a possibility. And if I remember correctly, I don't know what the Russell Wilson contract was, but he might be available as well. Another guy that Daboll has experience with is Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo was drafted to New England when Brian Daboll was there. So, I think everything you said is 100. At this point, everything is Adrianna, right? I'm saying that correctly? Yeah. Everything is a possibility.
Right.
And I always I get into spats back and forth with some Giants fans on X sometimes saying, hey, don't marry yourself to an idea yet. You have to keep – this team is so bad and they're so far down in the basement. You have to look through every crevice and say, hey, what would it be like if we went that route? What could it be like if we went that route, even if they're polar opposites? The macro level decision, this team needs a new quarterback. Team needs a better defense. The team needs a little bit more help on the offensive line. End the discussion. So as long as your narrative, your story, your goal, your plan gets you somewhat closer in that regard, I'm all for it. I think every plan right now needs to be considered.
Yeah. And we'll see a lot of that over the next few months, especially with how free agency goes. Before we wrap up, I also purchased your NFL draft guide, and I'm so excited about that.
Thank you.
For anyone who's interested, can you give us a quick little rundown of what that will include?
Yeah. I mean, I actually have the 2022 version right here. So basically, where am I? Here you go. I'm a little old school. I'm 39 years old. So I think we've gotten away from just the old school, read a book, we're all into tablets and Kindles and reading stuff online. We still print a draft guide. We pay to print a draft guide, which is not a great economic decision, but we've done this now for over 40 years, this company, not me. They started before I was even alive. And we're employed by a former 25-year NFL scout. I've been with them for 10 years. He's taught me everything I know about the industry. We have other guys that have worked in the league as well. We have guys trying to ascend to the league, and it's a very collaborative effort. And what I like the most about it is that we challenge each other. We challenge each other's thoughts and beliefs, and we try to almost find holes in each other's scouting reports and notes and evaluation. Because at the end of the day, that is how a team operates. It's never one man running the show. You're not just going to get my opinion or his opinion. This draft guide is the compilation of so many different football minds. And we meet with each other every Monday. And these meetings are now turning into 2 hours and just talking ball for 2 hours straight. And that draft guide that you order, you'll get it delivered to you prior to the draft. You'll get a post-draft analysis guide. And the draft itself it's all steak, no sizzle. It's all just football content. We're not talking about fantasy football. No disrespect to anyone that likes that. It's just all football. We're going to give you as much information about every player in the draft and every single team in the NFL in terms of where they need help on the roster. So there's a lot of good content in there, and we've been doing it a long time. And I think that credibility kind of gives us a little bit of an edge in a market that's very saturated right now.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be extremely valuable. So if anyone is interested, I'll put the link in the show notes too. And you have the printed out version, but there's also a PDF version for those of you who love the tablets.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We've that's one modern thing of our lads that we didn't have until just a few years ago, a real PDF version. And you do save some spending by doing that as well. And we have an insider account that we've currently just built this past year. That link is also available on the website, and it gives you an ad-free version of the website, which is probably the biggest complaint about our website, just to be transparent. It's the nature of the beast now. You can get an ad-free version of the website. It's very low cost, very cheap. In my opinion, that alone is worth it. But we also started the most up-to-date transaction wire in the business. It is updated pretty much every minute, all day, all week, all month, all year. And so if you ever want to know about a random Elijah Garcia that the Giants drafted, signed off the street this year, we'll have a little information on him. So that's another thing that you guys can look for. And you can also bundle those two together, the insider account and the draft guide.
Okay, awesome. And that's all at ourlads.com. Your Twitter is ourlads_sci. Anywhere else where they can find you?
YouTube, we have an Ourlads channel. Just started that last year. It's been going well. We're still trying to modify a little thing. We're trying to get a little bit better at creating content on there. We're working our way up, but those are the main places to look for our content. Is the newsletter that you can subscribe to, ourlads.com, and the Ourlads football YouTube channel.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So excited.
Thanks for having me. We'll have to try to hook up again before the draft and talk once we have a clear picture on what this team's going to be doing.
Definitely. And I will be at the Senior Bowl.
Oh, nice. Me too. Awesome. Great.
Awesome. I'll see you in Alabama.
Let's do it. See you later.
Bye.